Welcome to Prescribing Lifestyle, the podcast that's all about empowering you to live your healthiest, happiest life. I'm your host, Dr. Avi Charlton, and each week we'll dive into the latest research, practical tips, and inspiring stories to help you optimize your well-being. From nutrition and fitness to mental health and mindfulness, we'll explore every aspect of lifestyle medicine, giving you the tools you need to make informed decisions and take control of your life. Today, I have for you the recording of my talk from the Low Carb Dinner on the 18th of May 2024. I talk about the top 10 tips for thriving on your low carb journey. I will give you a few tips on managing your mindset, trying to help you think that you're not missing out, and how to maintain on sustaining this fabulous lifestyle and trying to change your mindset. I hope you enjoy this episode. Hello everybody, welcome to another episode of Prescribing Lifestyle Podcast. Today I've got a treat for you. I've invited Dr. Suresh Khirwadkar. He is called himself the Meat Medic. He hosts his own podcast. He's a lifestyle physician in Queensland. I've met him maybe once or twice in person, but we've had lots of contact online, and I've been on his podcast maybe a year ago. And we've had lots of interactions and exchanged our knowledge a few times, and it's been such a pleasure knowing Suresh. Welcome to the podcast, Suresh.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Avi. Thank you for inviting me on.
Great, thank you. I'll get you to introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your background.
Sure. Well, yeah, thank you. So, as you said, I'm a board-certified lifestyle physician and a specialist GP like yourself. Mainly doing more lifestyle work and, kind of functional integrative health work nowadays, but still do a little bit of core general practice as well, in my day job. But yeah, about a year ago now, I think it was maybe 18 months, I did my lifestyle lifestyle certification, because I've always wanted to practice in a way that really prioritizes lifestyle interventions and not medications. And I know you're along the same pathway as well, the same line of thinking, because too much of medicine is reliant on medicines, pharmaceuticals. And we know that comes with a lot of issues. And they have a role, they have a time and a place, the right person, they're a tool for the job. But I think a lot of people, both doctors and patients alike, really rely on these medications and are not really putting in the work or the lifestyle interventions, which ultimately we know are really what actually make the difference. And, you take type 2 diabetes as an example. Medications can improve it. There's no doubt. They can improve your blood sugars. They can improve the control. They can reduce the risk of complications. I mean, that much is very straightforward. But they'll never cure it. They'll never cure type 2 diabetes. They can't. I mean, maybe metformin, possibly. You can't really cure diabetes with medications, but you can cure it with lifestyle changes, diet, exercise, sleep, stress reduction, and so on. So these are the things that I think are really, really the most important. And this has been a long journey for me for 20 odd years, since I went to medical school first. That literally was 20 years ago, actually. And, really from the start, I thought, what, there's got to be a better way than just putting everyone onto medications. And thankfully, I had some good teachers through medical school and beyond who really helped me to develop that and encouraged me to go down that pathway rather than just stick to the standard, just prescribe all the drugs and off you go. So I was lucky in that regard that I was encouraged, rather than discouraged. And I think a lot of people are discouraged by the system. We are, as doctors, as incentivized in various ways to prescribe medications. It's the easier route, for everybody involved. Yet, as we said, it doesn't really, I think, benefit the patient ultimately. And there's a popular meme for doctors, which is, day one of medical school, a patient cured is a patient lost. which is possibly true. But, I think there is an incentive to kind of keep people unhealthy and on medications, which I just don't think is right. I think as doctors, our job should be to cure people, to help people, to get them away from us. At the end of the day, they shouldn't really have to come in and see us anymore. And I think that's what our job should be. So that's why I've always practiced that way. And I just went more and more down that route, saw the lifestyle medicine certification and realized, oh, actually, there's a name for what I do, Actually, this is kind of really cool. There's actually a name and there's people doing this around the world, a lot of people doing this around the world. And that was really exciting to me. And that's how I kind of got into that. And then as I've developed that, I've realized more and more that really lifestyle interventions, they really are the way forward, and just kind of rolled with that. And I made my podcast about 18 months ago. And as you said, you've been a guest on there and you were an excellent guest. And it's great we're going to record an episode after this, hopefully back to back, and get you back on the show as well. And really that was just a way of just spreading the message even more, that I think, lifestyle is really just the most important thing. And that it's within everyone's power to make those changes. The key thing that I've found is just finding a way to get people the knowledge. And that's why I made my podcast, to just try and spread that knowledge, I think, more than anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you. I'm also on the same track. I want to promote lifestyle. I want to take people off medications and help people find the right path. And having a podcast means I can get to talk to people like you and share the information out as much as we can. And yeah, absolutely. I'm certainly on the same path as you. Yeah, so I found my journey has been amazing so far. And I'm sure you have found similar journey. And tell us about your doctor journey, like how are you treating your patients, and is it much more rewarding that you've come along this track?
Sure. I mean, I think we can talk about that. Certainly my personal journey, if you want to as well, Dr.
Yeah,
Avi.
that'd be great.
I think the two are very much intertwined, to be perfectly honest. I think like everyone, I'm sure probably yourself included, we've all, all the doctors that I know, all the healthcare professionals that go down this kind of route, we've all got our own story, health story that's kind of opened our eyes to the reality and unfortunately the negatives of the kind of system as well, so to speak. But kind of professionally, I mean, I've really been working towards low carb medicine. That's kind of my bread and butter stuff, really, obviously outside of core general practice. And that's been very, very successful for myself personally and a lot of my patients in many ways. But I always just felt like it was great, but it wasn't quite the whole story. I always felt like something was just kind of missing. And for those people that it just didn't really seem to work for, like what was it that they were missing? And then I eventually, I've done everything. I mean, personally, professionally, fasting, low carb, keto, prolonged fasting, short-term fasting, water fasting, dry fasting, vegetarian, veganism. I mean, everything basically. And what I've found over the years is that everything can work to a certain point. But everything seems to have its kind of limitations or issues. And I don't think there's any one way, like diet wise at least, of doing things. I think there's more than one way to skin a cat, so to speak. So what I try and do really now professionally is, rather than pigeonhole people, pigeonhole myself, is just try and be broad. And I know it's a bit of a cliche, but this whole thing of meeting people where they're at, quote unquote.
Yeah.
It is a little bit of a cliche, and I sometimes cringe slightly when people say that. But I think genuinely, there's no point in, if I'm seeing a vegan patient, for example, and I do see vegan patients, even though I'm like 95% carnivore diet, they still see me, I still see them, we respect each other's views, and we've got more in common than we do differences. We all want to just get better in terms of our health. Yeah. But there's no point in me talking to them about the benefits of meats, at least not overly, we agree that yes, maybe there's benefits, but they just don't want to eat it, and that's perfectly fine. If you hammer the point home, well, we're just not going to come back. So you do have to kind of meet them a little bit where they're at.
Mm.
But my professional journey has really been much the same as my personal journey. Just over the years, learning, I think, is just the main thing. Learning from my mistakes, learning from other people like yourself, what
Mm.
works, what doesn't work, how we can improve things, and ultimately with the goal of the patient in mind. But it's really led me down the pathway that I'm on, and realizing that, yeah, diet is incredibly important. And I think
Mm.
we would all agree on that. But there's actually more to the story again. And I'm finding myself talking now a lot more about exercise to patients
Okay.
as
Yeah,
well.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Um, and I've started using the kind of, it's not an analogy as such, but the idea of muscle as a sponge.
Yes.
And this was kind of triggered by, I think it was, is it Brian Sanders from Food Lies? He put a tweet out saying, to slightly paraphrase, and I'm going to butcher it slightly, but
Mm-hmm.
rather than everybody focusing on the 1% spike in blood sugar,
Mm.
why not instead focus on building a body that can deal with that 1% spike of blood sugar?
No, this is a really
So
good. Yeah,
along those lines, I'm paraphrasing slightly, but
that's great.
I thought that was actually a really interesting point, and it kind of I knew that anyway, but sometimes you just have to read these things and see them again, and you kind of spark something in you. And so I've
Yeah.
started talking to patients now about much more about muscle and building muscle and the importance of exercise and resistance training in particular, as well as diet.
Mm-hmm.
Um, as building like a big sponge,
Mm.
basically to, again,
Yeah.
rather than hammering like the low carb and being obsessed with you got to have this many grams of sugar and so on, which I see in the kind of carnivore keto community, rather than really focusing on that, is actually saying to people, why don't you try building a body that can actually handle that extra 5 grams of sugar, that can handle
Mm.
the small amount of milk in a coffee
Yeah.
without actually doing anything realistically to your blood sugar levels. And I'm finding actually success with that myself personally and professionally. People can get behind that, especially when you tell them that they don't have to do huge amounts of exercise. People think they have to
Mm.
spend hours in the gym, and they really, really don't.
Yeah, absolutely agree.
But then
I
also,
think,
yeah,
yeah, sorry, I've been taught that only 2 times a week, 15 minutes of strength training, that's probably just enough.
pretty much. Yeah. I mean, I heard something a long time ago which resonated with me, and it was, per week, if you kind of break it down, realistically, you need less time spent exercising than we should spend brushing our teeth.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because, I mean, on average, like, dentists would probably say you should spend maybe 3 to 5 minutes brushing your teeth twice a day, maybe
Okay.
2 to 3 minutes, perhaps.
Yeah.
What's that, 4 or 5 minutes, a day? And
Yeah.
you're saying 15 minutes twice a week, that's 30
Yeah.
minutes. And I'm
Yep.
saying 5 minutes a day brushing teeth, that's 35
Yeah.
minutes a
You're
week.
right.
And that's
Yes.
the thing. People think they have to spend hours in the gym. They really don't actually. 5 minutes a
Mm.
day. And I talk to my patients really just about, if you can do 20 push-ups and 20 squats, just your own body weight.
Yeah.
And if you have to, do the push-ups on your knees, do them against the wall, make a slight angle, make it easier on yourself, start slow, build
Yeah.
up. If you can do that, 20 to 30 squats, 20, 30 push-ups a day, you're going to build quite a lot of functional muscle. You're not going to be a bodybuilder, no, but you don't need to be a bodybuilder. You're going
Yes.
to build quite a lot of functional muscle mass that's going to help you to really absorb those spikes in blood sugar, to smooth out your blood pressure, all of those physiological responses that we know are involved with, muscle mass is involved in that regulation, that homeostasis.
Mm.
It's going to just maintain, it's going to improve, and just things like your risk of ending up in a nursing home just go way down if you've
Mm.
got good muscle mass. We know this is
Yeah.
very true, so
Absolutely.
it's
Totally
super
agree.
important.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I would also suggest exercise snacks. Like if they're putting food in the microwave, 2 minutes, you can do 10 squats, and that's a good exercise snack. And it's
Yeah.
pretty easy to do, and they can just do it in 2 minutes. And
Mm.
then an hour later, they can do another 2 minutes of wall push-ups, and that's pretty easy to get hold of.
Absolutely. I mean, a squat and a push-up takes what, 4 or 5 seconds, maybe, depending on how
That's
slow
it.
you're doing it. Yeah, 10 of those is what, maybe a minute at most. all day
Absolutely.
long. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. That's great advice. So, you were doing carnivore when I last spoke to you about a year ago, and then you've moved away from full carnivore to not so carnivore. Tell us a bit more about that story.
Yeah, that's right. So what I noticed was, again, intertwined with my own personal and professional experience. On a personal level, when it got to about maybe 9 to 12 months, I was noticing that I was starting to get some issues. And what originally, when I went the carnivore diet, 2 days in, it was like, my God, I felt like Superman. It was just, it was
Mm,
just
mm,
unreal. Felt
mm,
so good. Um, and then that honestly persisted for maybe 6 to 9 months, maybe 9 to 12 months. I don't know exactly when I started to get some issues, but I started to notice I was having some issues and things like the stress kind of creeping back in, some just joint pains and things creeping back in, and my kind of just fatigue was coming back in very slightly. I mean, I still felt better than I did before I
mm,
started. Don't get me wrong,
mm.
give it some context, but
Yeah.
I just didn't feel like Superman anymore. And then the
Mm,
longer that time went on, I started to notice more and more issues. I was noticing some issues on my blood tests as well. Things like testosterone, going down a little bit. Nothing
mm.
dramatic,
Yeah.
but noticeable. And then combined with, again, things like libido and stuff were just dipping very slightly, these things that I was watching out for. And I noticed very similar with my patients as well. The
Okay.
ones that were doing pretty strict carnivore diet, the same kind of thing. I go around the same kind of time frame with men, maybe 6 to 12 months. Women tend to be more like 3 to 9 months.
Hmm.
And the middle point, kind of being the average for both, 9 months for men, maybe 6 months for women. And I was noticing similar issues with them, but I wasn't seeing those issues on people doing more of like a keto or like a ketovore. So still just like
Mm-hmm.
maybe a little bit of avocado, maybe a little tiny bit of fruit here and there, but still
Hmm.
very much, like keto. And I
Mm,
hadn't really seen these issues on keto or people doing low carb either, for the most part. I hadn't really seen
mm,
these specific issues.
mhm,
And so what I noticed with my patients and with myself is actually when I introduced that little bit of carbohydrates,
mhm,
actually the issues I was having pretty much just disappeared overnight. And I
mm,
just felt incredible again.
mm,
Um, which kind of goes against the whole, like sugar's really bad for you and carbs are the enemy, kind of mantra that we talk about, even in,
mhm,
like the low carb community.
mm,
And that again made me kind of open my eyes and say, okay, well, like, why is this happening? Like,
mm,
what is the process here? I want
mm.
to understand this,
Yeah.
rather than just knee jerking and saying, well, yeah, like carnivore's really bad now, like, because I'm getting issues. I was like, no, like carnivore's great for what it is, but like, why am I having these issues now? And then people like Paul Saladino, I'm sure you know of him.
Yeah.
He had similar issues on the carnivore diet as well. And lots of people, again, talking to lots of patients, talking to lots of people. A lot of people can have these kinds of issues. And, I think if people are probably being genuine, a lot of people out there doing the carnivore diet, quote unquote, are actually eating other bits as well here and there. They're
Mm.
just doing kind of what I'm doing, like 95% maybe carnivore diet and still calling it carnivore. Some people are doing animal based, fruit and honey and dairy and still calling it carnivore. So it's quite confusing for people.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, I noticed that when I added in some carbohydrates, added in maybe like a small bit of vegetables, and I'm, saying small, like tonight I had like
Mm.
a tablespoon of peas, like
Okay.
that kind of
Yep.
size vegetables,
Yep. Yep.
just enough for the nutrition, to fill
Mm.
those kind of gaps, things like folate, particularly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I noticed that I just felt better. My blood's improved, and I was seeing this with patients as well. And what I was seeing with a lot of them, myself included, although not to the same extent, was this almost like insulin resistance starting to develop, which was again really fascinating for me because I thought, hang on, how can you be like insulin resistant when you're not really
Mm.
eating any sugar? Like, that doesn't make any
Mm-hmm.
sense
Yep.
because we all know that carbs spike insulin.
Yep.
So an insulin equals carbs. But again, if you go back to like the 50s and Walter Kempner and the rice diet, I know I've spoke about this on the low carb,
Yes.
doctors group, and that
Mm-hmm.
didn't really get a lot of traction, unsurprisingly. But it's fascinating to me that, well, hang on, if carbs are the problem for diabetes, like how do you cure diabetes with carbs? It kind of doesn't really make any sense. How can you lose so much weight with carbs, all carb diet, if carbs are the problem?
Mm.
So again, that kind of made me realize, well, there must be more to the story. It's not just clear cut. It's not just carbs are bad, protein and fat's good. And what I'm kind of realizing is, yeah, there's more than one way to skin a cat, but also it's a lot more complicated than we think. And you can't just kind of knee jerk to like, well, sugar's just bad and therefore never, ever, ever eat sugar. And I think, human beings, we are designed to be metabolically flexible. I think to a certain extent, that may mean that we benefit from being metabolically flexible. And perhaps we should be metabolically flexible. And like seasonal eating, seasonal spring, summer, eat fruit, for example. Which also coincides with that 6 to 9 month, time frame without any sugar, that then people start to get some issues, which is just really fascinating. And then the more I delved into it, you get into then things like the Inuit population, that I know people like Dr. Anthony Chaffee like to talk about, but whether he's aware or not, I'm not sure. But actually, there's a lot of evidence showing the vast majority of Inuits are barely, if ever, in ketosis, despite the fact traditionally having no access to carbohydrates, because they have this particular genetic mutation that kind of effectively in this CPT1 gene that effectively kind of almost prevents them from going into ketosis, which is really interesting. And it was originally thought to be some sort of protective mechanism against long-term ketosis, which potentially may be a bad thing. We don't know. Now it's maybe thought perhaps there's some other reason, and it's not necessarily a protection against ketosis. So it's all a bit unclear as to why, but they're pretty much the only people on the planet who have this mutation. And it also just happens they're pretty much the only people on the planet that never had access traditionally to carbohydrates. So it's really interesting. And again, there's so much more to the story.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, but people like Marty Kendall, who I know who's fascinating and very, very intelligent, he kind of talks about all of these things rather than like insulin resistance, glucose, fat, etc. He kind of talks about it like energy and energy toxicity. And, because people love talking about like the Randall cycle and all these kind of complex things when it comes to sugar and keto, carnivore and so on. And I think really the long and short of it, when you look at the Randall cycle is, for people who don't know what the Randall cycle is, it's essentially boils down to you can either burn glucose or burn fatty acids. So either carbs or fat, essentially, is the simplistic overview of the Randall cycle. But if you're burning one, you can't burn the other. And this leads to people saying, well, if all you eat is carbohydrates, you can't burn fat. But they never think about it in the other way. If all you eat is fat and never eat any carbohydrates, actually, theoretically, you can block the burning of carbohydrates if you have excessive fat in your system. Not fat on your body, just kind of in your system, free fatty acids.
Yeah.
So this long-term chronic lack of sugar may also be an issue, but almost in reverse. And then if you block, quote unquote, the burning of glucose, well, then that leads to higher glucose levels, which will then lead to insulin and insulin resistance. So potentially it can work both ways. And maybe that's what I'm seeing in practice. And it's interesting. There are some case studies coming out of other people reporting similar things with this long-term, they're not quoting carnivore, but they're saying long-term strict keto diet, which is probably a pretty carnivore diet, saying similar things, that they're seeing this development of insulin resistance, which is really interesting. But anyway, long story short, I've rambled a little bit. It has led me down this kind of pathway of just, okay, let's just see what works ultimately for the patient. Not what works for me, not what works for you, not works for Dr. Baker, Dr. Berry, Dr. Chaffee, all these other clever people out there.
Yeah.
It's what ultimately works for that patient in front of me. And what works for them is going to be what's benefiting them the most in terms of their blood tests and so on, but ultimately what they can stick to.
Yeah, absolutely. I tell my patients, they've got to try what works for them. They've got to try it by themselves, and I can only suggest, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So do you, just with yourself, do you find you're feeling much better with more ketovore, introducing some vegetables?
I do. I don't eat a lot of vegetables. Again, like a tablespoon of peas, like once a day. We had a bit of mushroom tonight, like the occasional carrot. We eat a bit of avocado, bit of cauliflower, broccoli, mainly for the folate. They're high folate, low oxalate, very low toxicity on the whole vegetables. So that's what we focus on eating there. But again, we're talking like a really small amount, like a couple of tablespoons at most per day, not like
Mm.
mountains of vegetables like I used to eat, thinking it was really healthy for me.
Yep, yep.
Quite a bit of fruit. But again, I'm mainly around maybe 25, 30 grams of sugar a day
Yep.
with the occasional refeed on maybe a weekend. But then I also exercise pretty much most days now, doing calisthenics, building muscle. So yes, other things have maybe changed a little bit, but again, I'm building a body that can just deal with that little spike of sugar. So it really doesn't overly concern me, but I do feel a lot better. But also socially, it's less awkward, I suppose, is a word to say it. Going out, you can socialize a lot more. Like we're going down to Tracy's lived experiences workshop, and then we're going to go out for dinner, speaker dinner, and I can go and just have a steak with maybe a bit of mushroom on the side, whatever, and I don't have to worry about, okay, is it going to come with a bit of salad or something, And a lot of my patients have fed back to me about the carnivore diet specifically that it's great, they love it, but they just can't kind of do it long term for whatever reason, socially or whatever it is. Like they come in and they're just kind of like, I just really want a salad or something sometimes, and like they're having like the nicest steaks in the world and they just, but I think, I liken this to like, I give them like the chocolate cake analogy, there's like the world's best chocolate cake that's guilt-free, that's going to make you lose weight and fix all your problems. And, if you get to eat that for dinner, like you're so happy. If you get to eat that for breakfast the next day, you're happy. The dinner the next day, you're so happy. But what if you have to eat that every single day for the rest of your life? Like, the only meal, it's still the same chocolate cake that's going to solve world hunger and whatever. But it just doesn't sound quite so appealing when you're pretty much forced to just eat the same thing every day. And I think there's a little element of it in that people just sometimes want to eat a little bit different. But again, that 95% meat diet with just that little bit of difference here and there, I think that's pretty much spot on. I think that's what makes sense from an evolutionary perspective as well. And if you look at current day indigenous tribes, that's, again, a lot of what they eat is mainly just a meat heavy diet for the most part.
Yeah, that's how I eat as well, mostly meat. And sometimes I have some veggies, and I certainly every now and then would have salad and a little bit of fruit. That suits me, and I'm not quite ready to change, and that works for me.
Yeah.
That's great. So we'll see you in June, coming down to Melbourne in the Lived Experience conference with Tracy.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to coming to that. Tracy's great. I mean, she is so passionate about just spreading the word, educating people, just spreading that message of being healthy. And I thought on her show, it's such a privilege to be asked to come to talk at these kinds of events. That I just jump at the opportunity to just go and talk and learn from other people. I mean, there's so many good speakers, especially, yourself included, of course. So many people that I just want to listen to because there's so much expertise in this area. It's just unreal. I've got so much more to learn.
What's your topic?
So I'm talking about navigating fad diets.
And
because this is a thing that's kind of true to me, fairly personal to me. I've fallen into that trap many, many times. And so I'm hoping to kind of share my experiences with people, and hopefully they can then learn to maybe avoid some of the mistakes that I've made over the years.
Absolutely. I can't wait to hear your talk. That's great. All right. So people who wants to come to the Lived Experience conference, I've got a code, so you can private message me and I'll share your code for 15% off. And Tracy's also doing live stream as well, so you can listen to it at the comfort of your own home or listen to recordings. That's great. We might try and wrap it up because we don't want to make these podcasts for too long. We can talk on forever with Suresh, and I can't wait to catch up with you in June.
Yeah, no, definitely looking forward to coming to meet you again and listen to you talk. Absolutely, to learn from you.
Great. Where can people find you, Suresh?
So probably the best way, I'm pretty much at The Meat Medic at all my social media, and themeatmedic.com has got all my links, MEAT, The Meat Medic. That's probably the best place to find me.
That's great. Well, thank you for coming on to the podcast, Prescribing Lifestyle, with me.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. All right. Well, thank you to all the listeners for tuning in to Prescribing Lifestyle Podcast. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Prescribing Lifestyle. We hope you found today's discussion insightful and motivating. Remember, your health journey is a marathon, not a sprint. Implementing small, sustainable changes over time can lead to sustainable improvements in your well-being. Remember, these podcasts are not to be treated as medical advice. You should see your own doctor for medical treatment, or you can come in to see me in my clinic in Melbourne Low Carb Clinic, face-to-face or telehealth Australia-wide. If you have enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, rate and review us on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback helps us reach more listeners and continue bringing you valuable content. I also want to invite you to head to the website of Melbourne Low Carb Clinic to download a free ebook and join my free community on Facebook. Stay connected with us on the socials. And don't forget to share this podcast with your friends and family who might benefit from our discussions. Until next time, keep prioritizing your health and embrace the power of lifestyle medicine. Take care and see you soon on Prescribing Lifestyle.